Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sports Sitdown. I'm your host, Sunay Sanghani, and today I'm joined by Nate Martin and Kiran Costa for today's very special episode because we have outside linebacker for the Chicago Bears, James Vaughters, and former Stanford Cardinal standout. He played at Stanford for 4 years and now is currently with the Chicago Bears getting ready for next season. James, how are you doing today?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing fine. We're glad you could join us today, and I'm going to get right down to the questions we have for you today. It's obviously an interesting time to be an athlete today since there's everything going on with COVID, the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's really tough because you guys are isolated, can't have OTAs, training camp seems iffy even though it's going to happen in a few weeks. How are you doing in terms of preparation and training for next season? How are you staying healthy? Do you find it harder or easier with COVID, and how are you working around the challenges?
It's an interesting situation with COVID because, a lot of guys like to get into, group training during the off season, push each other, competing, whether it's in agilities, doing field drills, or, just trying to learn new things from each other. But it's kind of a situation where it's a road that I've kind of crossed before. I mean, I was with the Packers in 2015 as an undrafted rookie, and I tore my bicep. So I was kind of on my own for most of that season doing rehab. And then that whole next year, I was basically training by myself in a similar scenario, just kind of put my own training program together, not really having anybody pushing me, just making the active decision every day to get up, hit the field, get my field work in, get my conditioning in, go lift right after that. So it's almost like that season, but the 2.0 version for me. Fortunately, this time around, I have NFL season under my belt. So I had a little bit more resources as far as being able to invest in, a rack for the house, invest in, a pass rush dummy to keep at the house, and just different recovery equipment and things like that. So, it's been tough, but at the same time, I think the toughest part is probably that 6-month-long situation where you really aren't around anyone because, you may come by someone in passing at the gym when you're on off season by yourself, but this time it's really just you. So It's been a tough experience.
So switching topics a bit, we're going to move on to your career at Stanford. I'm a big Stanford fan. I've been a season ticket holder since 2014. And some of my earliest memories of attending Stanford football games have been watching you dominate on the defensive side. And obviously playing at Stanford, you got to train and play against some of the top players over the past 10 years in the NCAA. How did this help prepare you for the NFL?
So coming from Georgia, which has a completely different football culture than the West Coast and California, and just the type of game you're playing, being able to adjust to different scenarios, being able to adjust to different cultures, and to kind of do it without having that much family around. It's interesting because, there's a lot of different things that you have to deal with as a football player and as a professional football player, going from team to team, shoot, even country to country in my case. So just having the ability to adapt is one of the skills that I'm most thankful for going from Georgia all the way to Stanford, along with the academic prowess that Stanford has.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that right now. When you're at Stanford, what was it like trying to balance, of course, being a star on the football field and also at such a prestigious university like Stanford? What was the process like for you balancing academics and sports?
I'll go with the Malcolm X quote, by any means necessary. You spend so much time, like during the season, you're at the facility from around like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock to maybe 8:30 at night. So as far as getting my actual schoolwork done, it was a situation where I probably wrote 90% of my papers between the hours of midnight and 9:30 in the morning when we would have to be at mandatory breakfast every morning. So, it would be get home from practice at 9:30, go to sleep at 11, wake up at 3 o'clock, write a little bit. Hopefully I get done. I can go back to sleep. If I don't, I might just stay up that whole night, maybe sleep the next day, try to catch a little bit of what I had in lecture on the slides, so I'll be ready for practice the next day. So it's really just, the whole concept of having like a set schedule that doesn't change every day and that doesn't have to be organic and really adjust to whatever the needs are is something that, I wasn't necessarily, that I was glad I got a chance to do, but at the same time, it was a grueling process. But I had great teammates with me the whole time that were also going through the same thing. So I appreciate that experience, and some of my best friends are guys that I met playing football or went to school with at Stanford.
Now, you didn't get to play under Jim Harbaugh, who is a man that may consider to be the man that brought back football to Stanford, but he did recruit you. What was that like being recruited by the legendary recruiter Jim Harbaugh?
Harbaugh is a funny guy. He's a very energetic guy, and it's funny because now being with the Bears, having him play there, and the equipment guys, they actually know him personally. So it's funny because they say, "Oh, you think Harbaugh might have been bad in college, man? He was way more competitive as a player," and that's really speaks to his kind of mantra. He's a competitive guy. He'd be at my high school the same days Nick Saban be up there, the same days Urban Meyer be up there, and he's competing in a conversation, trying to get his talking points in. So Harbaugh was an interesting guy to be around, mainly because that competitiveness was something that I felt like my coach in high school had ingrained in me, and something that I was excited to be a part of at Stanford. But as I said before, things don't always go as planned.
Wait, so you just said, you just dropped that in there casually. You had Nick Saban and Jim Harbaugh come after you at these games. How was that experience like out of high school when these legendary coaches come to your games just to talk to you, just to meet you? Yeah, talk through that process a little bit, because that's really special.
Yeah, so I mean, it's funny because when you're working so hard to get there, it's not. I wouldn't say that I'm the person that was sitting up and watching every college football game on Saturday, because most of the time I had a game the day before, and I might sleep the entire day Saturday. So like, it was I was glad to have it, and I was glad to be able to go through that process, because it gives you the idea that anything's really possible. You see something on TV and you can achieve it, and I feel like that's something that's kind of driven my work ethic from then on.
So you talked about your recruiting, and you did eventually commit to Stanford, as we all know, and you had many accolades there and memories created. The one that was most memorable for me was I'm originally from Australia, and I remember we were visiting Australia during the 2014 Foster Farms Bowl, and I had to get up at like 6 in the morning to watch the game. And I remember you dominating on defense, I believe 2 sacks and a forced fumble, and you won game MVP. Did any memory stand out from your time at Stanford?
As far as on-field memories, you mean?
Well, yeah, on field and as well as off the field.
Of course, because I mean, when you're on your own for the first time, just socially, you have the opportunity to, if you want to stay at home, you stay at home, and if you want to go out on the weekend, you go out on the weekend. But I think for me on the field, it was always a situation where I was playing around guys that pretty much my entire front seven played in the league, and also some of our DBs, players like Josh Morrow, Henry Anderson, David Perry, AJ Tarpley, Shane Scove. I mean, you're competing to make plays every day. And the one thing that I always think about, I probably shouldn't think about it as much as I do, is, I didn't have, from the time I left high school to the Foster Farms Bowl, I didn't have any on-field accolades. And a lot of that has to do with me changing positions over and over again, but it also has to do with the fact that, every single guy I was playing with was an NFL caliber talent. Not to say that I was less of an NFL caliber talent than they were, but it was a lot of adjustment involved, and guys were hungry to get that. So to get that defensive MVP in the Foster Farms Bowl, even though it wasn't as big a bowl game as we had played in previous years, it was one of the memories that is very big to me. And also, I guess, some of my play in one of our game-sealing drives my junior year versus Oregon. those are memories that really stick out in my mind.
Part of the reason why we love talking to Stanford guys is because of, like Kiran said, the academic challenge is as great as the football challenge. And you guys have to really, really work hard. You have a political science degree from Stanford, and shout out to you for that. And you've been very outspoken about this Black Lives Matter movement on Twitter, on social media. And I just want to get your thoughts. Like, how do you as an athlete plan to continue this conversation throughout the league and, throughout the years, really, because there is change that's needed?
So for me, it's a situation where I think there's so many different types of activism on such a complex issue that's really ingrained in American culture. And I think it's all about finding your path within that activism. Like, yes, signing petitions, yes, donating to causes is one thing, but also being willing to have those conversations, the tough conversations with people that may not necessarily agree with you, whether it's, having a conversation on intersectionality with women, having conversations about racism with men that may not think like you. I think what we have to understand is it's a human issue as much as it is a Black issue, a white issue, an American issue, because if you really get down to it and look at, I guess, the entire institution and the entire thought process that is racism, you find one thing that I found when I went to Canada is a lot of people of color in different countries and from different countries have similar sentiments when it comes to human rights, social activism, and movements similar to Black Lives Matter. So I think the most important thing that we can do is continue to seek information that may make us uncomfortable, continue to seek conversations that may make us uncomfortable, and, find your pathway of activism. One thing that I'm kind of working on is I did major in political science, but I'll probably go back to school for architecture when I finish playing. And art and architecture are things that have been very close to me and have inspired me throughout my career. So now I'm in a situation where I'm trying to put together an avenue to promote Black artists, promote Black architectural history, because you hear a lot about architects. You hear about the Frank Lloyd Wrights, Mies van der Rohes, and the Le Corbusiers, but there's also a lot of Black architects that have made a difference in our community and have shaped the way that we operate as a community. And I think it's important to shed light on those things that may not be as popular, but things that are still important to note.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really cool. Obviously, going to Stanford, you're a smart guy, so, and I think it's really cool that you want to, after your career, go to architecture. But let's go back to Black Lives Matter. The NFL, just a couple years ago, was opposing players peacefully protesting, and now they're allowing players to kneel during the national anthem. What more could the league do to make it to be a major force of social change?
Well, thankfully, we have voices like Malcolm Jenkins, Anquan Bolden, and the guys of the Players Coalition. And also on a more local basis, I think the Bears did a great job of really empowering us as players to really speak out on these issues. We formed a new social justice committee. We are hoping once we get back to vote on a number of initiatives in the community. And also they gave us the freedom to, speak out on social media when a lot of guys may not necessarily feel as comfortable doing so in the past. So I think that it's important not only for the NFL, but also for each individual franchise to really liberate their players and empower their players when it comes to standing up for things that they believe in that could improve the quality of our society. I mean, everybody talks about the more than an athlete movement and the shut up and dribble quote. And I think there's a lot of situations where across all sports, we have an opportunity now to really push our initiatives and, show that, we're tax-paying Americans just like everyone else. I think that we have just as much a right to speak out on these things as anyone else does.
Moving quickly back over to your playing career, you played in both the CFL and NFL and were drafted into the XFL. What were your experiences like in the Canadian Football League versus the National Football League?
So I think it's more of a, not even National Football League versus Canadian Football League, but just a different football culture to begin with. Sometimes I'd kind of equate the following of the CFL in Canada to, I guess, like MLS soccer here, which I like soccer. I follow soccer. I follow Atlanta United, but it's something that like you're seen as a professional athlete, but you don't, I guess, function on the same, I guess you don't function with the same visibility that NFL players do. But I think what I appreciated most about it is in the CFL, number one, we were able to speak out on social justice issues, and you're around similar players to you as far as the Americans that play in the CFL aren't just, you know, the 90th guy from a camp last, like on any given year that just wanted another shot. Most of them are guys that either played on multiple teams, were on practice squads on multiple teams, and through one reason or another, whether it was behavioral issues, whether it was, you know, substance policy issues, whether it's even just a lack of cohesiveness with the culture in an NFL locker room. There's a lot of guys that end up in the CFL, and all of them have been through that humbling situation of knowing that you're good enough to do something, and for one reason or another, you have to kind of start over and try to build yourself back up in a different country. So it was an experience where I was glad to be around people who had been through the same thing as I had, because as I said earlier, I had been training by myself for 2 years and really felt like I was on an island, isolated to a certain extent by myself, going through something that I didn't know anyone that had been through it. And it seems like almost overnight I was thrust into an environment where I have a full team of teammates who have been through the exact same thing that I have, as well as interacting with other Canadian football players who have talent that often gets overlooked just because of the fact that they're Canadian. So I loved playing in the CFL. I think it really was formative for me as a player. And it's, I just got to continue to appreciate every experience that I have playing this game, because it's taken me places where I never thought that I would even go.
Now, obviously, you mentioned the players who have who work their butts off to get to the NFL or just any league in that matter. But this year, in particular, might be the hardest yet for them because of COVID-19. But talking about COVID-19, football players obviously have a lot of contact with other guys from different cities, especially guys like you on defense. Considering this, what is a realistic goal for the NFL season?
That's hard for me to say. I'm not a doctor. I don't work. I'm not a health worker. It's hard for me to say what the best plan of action is, but all I can say is that I hope that in a timely manner, they make decisions and come to an agreement with the NFL Players Association that are cognizant of the risk and that are realistic for us to be able to play and be protected. Because I mean, we all have families. Some of us have children, and I think that, you know, it's just like a lot of people can continue to work at home, and unfortunately, football isn't an industry where you can just sit at home and, you know, be winning football games and, you know, putting on a performance for the fans. So hopefully they find a way to, whether it ends up getting delayed, whether we end up having to take extensive precautions when we get to camp. I just hope that they are made with the players' needs and the players' safety in mind.
Would you feel comfortable going out there right now, or?
So we're supposed to go a week from today,
Right, for training camp.
And there's a variety of changes that I think will be helpful being discussed. But I mean, comfortable, I don't know if comfortable is the word, but it's no doubt in my mind that I'd be willing to actually go up.
Yeah. And, speaking of training camp and preseason, you had an extremely impressive preseason last year. It was, sack fumbles and forced fumbles and limited snaps, which was very, very great. And you turned a lot of eyes last year. And like you mentioned, you went to the CFL, multiple teams at the NFL. A lot of people would have given up. What made you persevere throughout your career?
Um, so it kind of takes me to that question. Kind of takes me to a moment that I remember back in 2016, before I had gotten the CFL, before I'd gotten the CFL deal. After I'd been cut from the CFL the same CFL team that I ended up playing with. I got cut from their practice squad in what month was that? September of 2016. And then 3 days after I got cut by them, I went to the Chargers preseason camp a week late. And after I got cut from that, I'd been cut maybe 5 times in that year. And I ended up getting 2 tryouts. Like I had basically been overlooked 5 times in 2016. And I was in a situation mentally and emotionally where I was like, I don't know if I can continue to deal with just letdown after letdown after letdown. But looking at, my age being 22 years old and looking at it really does seem divine sometimes, some of the influences that I guess, or content that kind of comes into your vision during times. I don't know if you all remember the movie Fences with Denzel Washington about, a guy who played in the Negro Leagues and wanted to play in the major leagues, but never really got the opportunity. And it kind of resonated with me because my dad was somebody that played baseball and that had aspirations to play professionally. And every time I meet one of his friends from high school, they're like, man, he really should have had an opportunity, but he grew up in a black township, which is more or less segregation in a small town in Ohio. And for me to go ahead and give up on something that I knew that I had even a sliver of an opportunity to do, I knew that there would be a load of regret that would be in my mind. And I just came to the point where I was like, if mental and emotional strain is the only reason why I'm giving this up, and it's not physical, it's not anything, there's no other, that's the only reason why I'm giving this up, it just doesn't make sense for me to do that with the possible positives that can come from it. Because the reason why I always wanted to play professionally was not only to, fulfill a dream that I had, but there was someone that inspired that dream in me. And I always saw myself as having the opportunity to be that for someone else. And for me to pass that up based on some, I guess, mental or emotional strain that was lesser than a lot of people that had come before me, I just didn't feel comfortable giving it up. And I had to, give it all that I had every day. And I think that really manifests when I got to the preseason last year, because throughout my entire CFL season, I never started or played a game without somebody getting hurt. And when you know that there's a chance that somebody's going to come back and you'll be back either just playing special teams or back on practice squad again, you learn to flip that switch when you get that opportunity to make that play, no matter how many reps you have, no matter, what the game situation is. When you get tossed into that situation, it's not like college where, I know I'm starting this week and, I'm playing next to a bunch of guys. So I guess I may have, if I don't make a play this week, I'll have an excuse. I play with some great players. That whole mentality goes out the window. When you get experience with using that mentality over and over again with 18-game season, deep playoff runs, coming back into the NFL with all that experience under my belt and understanding how to, strategize my rushes, understanding how to, flip that switch, I think I'm 100% glad with every experience that I've had, because a lot of guys, coming to the league and undrafted and on practice squads like I was before I got hurt, and they never really get the opportunity to have that in-game experience that really puts you in a situation where you can make those plays as a 26-year-old rookie. So I'm really thankful for every stretch of that entire experience, the ups and downs, all of it.
As you're talking about, you've bounced around on so many different teams. and so many different practice squads, even in the CFL, NFL. Can you think of one player from all those practice squads, college, that you loved playing with, a coach or a player that really stands out as one of your favorite teammates?
You know, I when I think about that question, it's you know, you think it'll be a coach, you think it'll be someone that you really played with early, but for me it was Micah Johnson, who was you know, a high school All-American like I was. He played at Kentucky. He went undrafted to the Giants back in 2010, and he bounced to five different NFL practice squads, and he's an All-Pro in the CFL. And I played next to him as a defensive end. He played defensive tackle. I played next to him almost every game that I played in the CFL. And just seeing his work ethic, seeing the injuries that he had come back from. He had double knees in his first year in the CFL, 2 ACL surgeries. And he's a player that just played with a level of emotion and a level of love for the game that I always aspired to. And not only that, but he was a player that not only played with that emotion, but he also put that emotion towards his teammates. If he saw me, you know, not playing as loose as I could be playing, not playing as aggressive as I could be playing, he'd be like, man, I've had my shot at the NFL. I perform every year in the CFL. I want to see you have the opportunity to go and get that, to go and taste that experience in the NFL. I want you to get the opportunity to taste what it feels like to, you know, rack up sacks on a consistent basis. Like, it's like, I know, like, you know, the team really wants me to excel because I'm the guy they pay the most money to, but I want to see you succeed. And that encouragement, I think, is something that, you know, really changed the way that I looked at the game. And I don't see myself really coming on as a player the way that I do without having a chance to play next to him. Sometimes I'll cut on some of the plays that I recorded from back in the day. And I don't know if you guys see those videos on social media where, you know, 2 players that play on the same team may end up in sync for like maybe a split second or a second and a half. And I cut on the tape and I see plays like that between me and him because he's literally in my periphery every time I come off the line of scrimmage. And, you know, that was something that I'm really thankful for, that whole experience, because you really don't. If I had never gone to the CFL, I would have played my entire football career without having a player that I played next to that really encouraged me and empowered me in that way.
That's awesome. It's the unknowns that as you said, that really make a change and inspiration in your life. That's an awesome story. It's great to talk to you. That does it for all our questions. Thank you so much for coming on. It was great to hear all your stories. Keep staying active on social media. You can follow him on Twitter and on Instagram. I've enjoyed reading some of the things that he's published on his stories on Twitter. Great guy. Good luck to you next season. We'll be rooting for you and watching your games.
Appreciate you guys. Keep it up too. These are some of the best questions I've gotten so far in my career. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you. That does it for our episode for the Sports Sit Down. We'll see you next time.